Imagine a world where the North Sea Empire survived beyond the sons of Cnut the Great, where the frigid waters of the North Sea became the lifeblood of a unified superpower. Today, we will discuss how Cnut's empire could have survived and paint an alternative history where it rose far beyond its real story. Let's get into it. I'm your host, Andrew. Welcome to another episode of Europa Historia. The North Sea Empire was a personal union between the kingdoms of Denmark, England, and Norway from the years 1013 through 1042, which reached its height under the reign of the Viking king Cnut the Great. The union quickly collapsed following the death of Cnut due to internal struggles, distance, and a succession crisis, all of which could have been remedied under the leadership of a cult of personality leader such as Cnut himself. Admittedly, larger-than-life figures are not easy to come by, which is why the empire surviving beyond Cnut was highly unlikely, but not impossible. So our timeline's point of divergence is, instead of the empire beginning its decline after Cnut's death at the age of 41, what if Cnut lived another 20 years, long enough to officially unite his dispersed kingdoms into one empire, consolidate their power under one banner, and ensure his realm could survive the pitfalls of succession following his eventual demise? Simply put, the longer Cnut lives, the greater the chance of the empire surviving into the future. An additional 20 years of power consolidation would have considerably increased the empire's stability. One of the first major differences would be the quick reclamation of Norway. In real life, Magnus Olafsson the Good took the throne of Norway for himself in 1035 from Cnut's son and regent, Sweyn. Cnut died in England before he could personally squash Olaf's rebellion, in turn leaving the war to Harthacnut, which he would unsuccessfully finish, losing the Kingdom of Norway and his father's throne forever. In our timeline, Cnut sails across the North Sea with a mighty warband, as he had many times before, crushing Olaf's forces and securing his Norwegian throne. Cnut was a wise ruler. He would learn from this period of errant instability and seek to prevent his other kingdoms from rising up against his dynasty in the future. A mere regency position wouldn't prevent another rebellion, so Cnut would decide to create a formal imperial structure to govern his vast realm, declaring himself Emperor of the North Sea. The three disjointed kingdoms would each officially coronate one of Cnut's sons as their king. Sweyn would become king of Norway, Harold would become king of Denmark, and Harthacnut would rule as king of England. Each of these kings would answer only to Emperor Cnut himself, who would establish an itinerant court on the deck of Ormrin Langi, a massive longship commandeered by his father, Forkbeard. It was the medieval equivalent of an aircraft carrier and would become the symbol of Cnut's power. Cnut's court would follow him wherever he was needed, settling for longer periods of time in his son's capitals, London, Bergen, and Roskilde. In order to get the culturally diverse nobility behind the idea of empire, administrative power would be decentralized and dispersed amongst the earldoms. Powerful earls like Godwin of Wessex would enjoy increased wealth and influence in exchange for their devout loyalty to the imperial dynasty. And upon realizing the benefits of this newfound empire, the nobility of each kingdom would buy in and begin the process of adopting and promoting a shared northern identity, similar to the idea of a Roman or American identity that allows people of different backgrounds to unite under an overarching culture. Cnut, looking beyond the confines of his lifetime, would do everything in his power to advance the northern identity, not only as a culture, but as an institution worth protecting and assimilating into. He would implement a common northern law across his empire, and a central pillar of this system would be the crown's duty to protect every citizen of the empire from all threats, foreign and domestic, in addition to the right of free trade within the empire's borders. Not only would these privileges encourage citizens of every class to cast aside national sentiment in favor of the northern identity, it would increase the wealth, prosperity, and stability of each kingdom. Over time, this identity would manifest itself into the architecture, language, and social customs. In order to combat any dissenters to the newfound order, Cnut's standing Huscarl army would increase in both size and organization, emulating the structure of the Roman legions. Also, a standing navy would develop, not only to guard the shores of the empire, but to ensure the protection of trade vessels, communication ships, and enforce the Pax Aquilo Mare, peace in the North Sea. Rome had its roads, and the Northern Empire would have its boats. The long-term survival of the empire would require a system designed to prevent an eventual succession crisis or the rise of a dictator. Foreseeing this, Cnut would found an imperial council reminiscent of the English Witan and Scandinavian Riksråd, whose primary purpose would be to elect the northern emperor whenever the previous one passes. Now that we've covered how the North Sea Empire could have survived, let's get to the good stuff: how the history of Europe would change. The High to Late Middle Ages are the easiest eras to speculate about. The most immediate change is that the Norman conquest of England never happens, as William of Normandy would have no claim to the English throne. This change alone would have massive cascading effects across history. England would be far less likely to implement the feudalistic societal structure brought over the Channel by the Normans. Fewer castles would be built all across England, but a greater number of canals would take their place, allowing for increased shipping throughout the country. Perhaps the biggest difference would be the English language. Instead of the immense amount of French influence, we would see an Old Norse influence take its place. Instead of rendezvousing at a cafe to plan a coup, you'd mot at a fika to plan a purya. Within the first 100 years of the empire's creation, the neighboring tributary states of the British Isles would be formally annexed into the empire. The kingdoms of Scotland, Ireland, and Wales would be created to better govern their territory. With the British Isles unified, the North Sea would effectively become an imperial lake. Any country sharing its border would look on in fear or admiration, knowing their destiny would one day clash with the descendants of Cnut. At this point, the North Sea Empire would be powerful enough to attract the attention and envy of all of Europe. In order to ensure the security of the realm, the Northerners would cement their already deepened ties with the Holy Roman Empire. In real life, Cnut's daughter Gunhilda married the son of Emperor Conrad II, Henry III, but died before she was crowned Queen of the Germans. In this timeline, she survives long enough to arrange a military alliance between the two great powers. The two empires would have a common rival in France, and despite the strength of the Franks, they would be no match to the enemies that surround them. France could potentially seek allies in Iberia or Eastern Europe, but they would face great struggles for centuries to come regardless. The empire would eventually expand beyond the North Sea. In real life, the Viking descendant Normans led a 200-year campaign against southern Italy, resulting in the Norman kingdom of Sicily. In our timeline, the northern emperor learns of his kinsman's conquest and decides he wants a piece of the action. The peninsula would fall much quicker when faced with the might of the northern forces, and eventually the kingdom of Sicily would be added to the empire under a more autonomous status due to its distance. The Byzantine emperor would take great offense to a rival empire settling in his backyard, potentially leading to a major conflict. This would have major consequences for the Crusades. On one hand, the early Crusades would see greater success with the zealous assistance of the northern forces, but the North Sea might be resistant to the idea of continually helping the rival Byzantine Empire. As we get farther from our point of divergence, our speculations will become more far-fetched. Even so, we can confidently assume there are two major conflicts that wouldn't have happened. The 100 Years' War and the War of the Roses would have no reason to occur in this timeline, but conflict between the Northern Empire and France would still be inevitable. Over the years, a series of wars begun by northern aggression would occur, almost certainly involving the Germans. The Holy Roman Empire would have territorial interests in Flanders, Burgundy, and Dauphine, while the North Sea Empire would seek control of Normandy, Brittany, and any other land along the French coast. Normandy might simply break ties to the French crown in favor of their Viking roots, and the famous battles of Agincourt and Poitiers would be replaced by equally brutal fights characterized by huscarls equipped with plate mail, pitted against the equally equipped French men-at-arms. The battles would be slugfests, and the conflicts would be long and arduous, but would eventually end in a North Sea victory. While the Northern Army is dominating continental Europe, the Navy would be bringing the dispersed territories of the North Atlantic under heel. Iceland and Greenland would become fully integrated into the empire, and the saga of Leif Erikson and his Vinland adventures would be legend to every child of the North Sea. Inspired by these tales, the emperor would fund further expeditions into North America, beginning the Age of Exploration centuries earlier. The east coast of North America would become the main frontier of the North Sea Empire, with colonies emerging all across it. By the 1500s, the North Sea Empire would have been established for half a millennia. Its institutions would be tradition, and its position of power in Europe would be second to none. When the Protestant Reformation began in 1517, the Northern Empire would be quick to defend the Church and its longtime ally in the Holy Roman Empire. Any hint of religious reform would be met with swift, aggressive action. This intolerance would cause great upheaval amongst a population with a freeholding, largely autonomous legacy. The Northern Empire would find itself in a struggle to put down the Huguenots in its formerly French-owned territory. And in order to combat the spread of Protestant literature, pamphlets telling the sagas of old would flood the markets in an attempt to mythologize the history of the empire. This state-supported, propaganda-esque system would help further glorify the Northern identity and quell the Reformation movement. The 30 Years' War could still occur, but with drastically different belligerents. At this point, Sweden would have been conquered and integrated into the empire, removing the most prominent member of the anti-Habsburg alliance and striking Gustavus Adolphus from his enshrinement in military history books, potentially setting modern warfare tactics back centuries. Denmark and Norway would obviously be on the Catholic side as well, and the Dutch Republic would be a toss-up. In any case, the pro-Habsburg alliance would see greater success against their Protestant opponents. Lutherans and other Protestants wouldn't be defeated completely, but Catholicism's role in Europe would be largely held intact. The Holy Roman Empire would remain a loosely held together but powerful union for a longer period of time, potentially even using the conflict as a catalyst for a formal unification. At this point, if not in the hundreds of years prior, the Scandinavian roots of the empire would be too strong to ignore, so the territory along most of the Baltic coast, with the exception of St. Petersburg, would be conquered and added to the empire. This includes the territory that is now Finland and the Baltic states, as well as Pomerania. Meanwhile, as continental Europe was getting it on, the North Sea Empire was expanding across the Atlantic, with colonial subjects taking root all across North America. Their head start could allow complete domination of the continent, largely preventing the Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, and French from obtaining a foothold anywhere north of Central America. The flip side of this is that they would leave the Southern Hemisphere, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific to their rivals, foregoing the real-life expansion of the British Empire. Even so, their naval dominance across the Atlantic, combined with the immense resources of the New World, would allow them to reach economic and militaristic heights beyond the wildest dreams of Cnut. We have already reached intense levels of wild speculation. Anything beyond this point is just pure fantasy, but let's speed run through some crazy ideas about the modern era anyways. The revolutionary sentiment of the 18th and 19th century would still likely lead to the forced release of the overseas colonies, unless the emperor agrees to an even greater autonomous state of affairs, but let's say he doesn't, as history shows monarchs often don't, and America wins its independence through a war of attrition. In another major break from real history, the Napoleonic Wars likely wouldn't have happened, due to France's lesser position on the world stage. If Napoleon managed to rise as leader of the remnants of France, he probably wouldn't have the manpower or production capabilities at his disposal to conquer Europe. If the empire survives with its monarchical structure intact and World War I still kicks off, we'd probably see a coalition consisting of France, Spain, Northern Italy, and Russia against the alliance of the Northern Empire and a unified Holy Roman German Empire. The alliance between the North and HRGE would probably win this conflict, unless internal anti-monarchical turmoil erupts, taking them down from the inside. Let's say the longtime allies were smart enough to appease their citizens enough to avoid this, winning the war and upholding their monarchical institutions well into the 20th century. World War II just wouldn't have happened, unless of course some angry failed French artist managed to rise as dictator, but let's say he became the next Monet instead. Due to bonds never becoming repaired in a series of world wars, America and Europe never become allies, instead seeing each other as competing rivals. The USSR emerges as another combatant, and a three-way Cold War engulfs the rest of the 20th century. In order to outcompete the rival superpowers, the North Sea Empire moves to formally unite with the HRE under one banner. The European Union forms as a unitary state, and soon the surrounding European nations see the benefits of this venture and seek integration into the modern empire. How this union is administered is anybody's guess. Honestly, at this point the video has become completely ridiculous, so I better stop before a three-way nuclear exchange tarnishes the legacy of Cnut. Thanks for watching, everybody. I've been your host, Andrew, and I'll see y'all on the next episode of Europa Historia.